Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion, The Importance of Islamic Education, with Nashaba Afzal, Imam Tahir Anwar, Heba Al-Haddad, and Sheikh Alauddin Al-Bakri. This event is brought to you by Silicon Valley Academy, a pre-K through 8th grade Islamic school located in Sunnyvale, California, and by our co-sponsors, Tawaso, a nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering Muslim youth who are confident in their identity, devoted to the practice of their faith, and passionate about improving society. And by Be Glad, a national educational organization dedicated to training teachers and administrators of public and private schools in effective pedagogical strategies to promote accelerated academic achievement. My name is Zeba Haq, and I am the president of Silicon Valley Academy's board of directors, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. We have an amazing panel of experts here who are leaders in our Bay Area and national Muslim community. First, we have Sister Nashaba Afzal, who is an expert in education and has served public and private schools for over 25 years as a teacher, counselor, teacher trainer, and educational consultant. She has been recognized by Who's Who among America's teachers, has provided professional development training to over 20,000 public and private school teachers, administrators, superintendents, and state and national officials across the country, as well as internationally, and has conducted educational research at leading universities, including at Stanford University. For 17 years, Nashaba served as a site director, overseeing curriculum and instruction at Silicon Valley Academy, and is currently a Silicon Valley Academy advisory board member. Next, we have Imam Tahir Anwar. Imam Tahir is an American Muslim scholar and preacher. Born in London, England, he has lived in the San Francisco Bay Area since 1983. After completing his religious studies, Imam Tahir has been serving the Bay Area Muslim community since 2000. He also teaches Islamic law at Zaytuna College, America's first accredited Muslim liberal arts college located in Berkeley, California. He is currently the chairman of the board of NISA, or North American Islamic Shelter for the Abused, an organization that works towards alleviating issues related to domestic violence. Imam Tahir is also a founding board member of Averroes High School, an Islamic college preparatory high school located in Fremont, California, and a current advisory board member of Silicon Valley Academy. Sheikh Alauddin Al-Bakri is an Islamic scholar and Muslim community leader, both locally and nationwide. He began his study of Islam at a young age in North Africa and continued in Jordan. He has served as the imam at several masajid and Islamic centers and has worked to establish full-time and weekend Islamic schools across the country. He is a founding board member of Iman, Inner City Muslim Action Network in Chicago, and serves as an advisory board member for Silicon Valley Academy and Averroes High School. Finally, we have Heba Al-Haddad. Sister Heba is a clinical psychologist who has her master's degree and is currently pursuing her doctorate degree at California Southern University. Heba is an affiliate of the Stanford Muslim Mental Health Lab, which focuses on providing resources for clinicians, researchers, and community leaders working with the Muslim population. Heba has worked to promote awareness around mental health through seminars, workshops, and lectures through her role as a health education instructor at Kaiser Permanente. She is currently a psychotherapist at the Khalil Center and serves as a mental health practitioner at Zaytuna College. Heba is also part of a group of clinicians and scholars who recently published a text entitled Applying Islamic Principles to Clinical Mental Health Care for Muslim Practitioners Nationwide. Welcome. Before I start with my first question to the panel, I'd like to share that this event is intended to be a resource for our community to help guide our children on the path of Islam. The term Islamic education is a broad term that encompasses various strategies to help our youth form a strong Muslim identity, from parental nurturing to social group interactions, as well as institutions that our community can leverage to teach our children the Quran and Sunnah, including Islamic full-time and weekend schools. So to get started on my question, I think I'm going to ask really, we'll start at the beginning. It would be great to hear from each of you what parents should be thinking about to inculcate Islamic beliefs, values, and behaviors in their children at a very young age. And if we can start with you, Sheikh Ala.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Thank you, Sister Zeba, and I would like to thank Silicon Valley Academy for organizing and arranging such a beautiful and timely and needed seminar that we probably need one like this every weekend. Alhamdulillah. So I feel like when we talk about inculcating Islamic education in the life of our children, the first thing that I see is that it becomes mission impossible, monumental task for parents. And they become like a deer with the headlights in its eye. Oh my God, this is too much. What am I going to do? How can I do it in this? Inshallah, it is easy if Allah makes it easy for you, and you have a lot of resources and you can do so many things that you can inculcate the Islamic education in the life of your children. Islamic education, if you look at it from the point of view of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, it's very interesting that we refer to Rasulullah as the messenger of Allah and the people around him as Sahaba. If you ask, I do this really lifetime, if you ask any 6-year-old child, who's the best teacher that ever lived on planet Earth, a Muslim 6 years old, he will say Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. If you say, who were the best students, an 8-year-old will say the Sahaba. But yet we do not refer to them as the great teacher and the great students. We refer to them as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam and his companions. That is the secret. The word Sahaba is the secret of what Islamic education is all about. It's about companionship. It's about friendship. It's about fellowship. It's about the environment. It's about the mostly seen, lived, but unspoken. So you just need to be yourself. Look at your home. Look at the design of your house. Do you have a place for the prayers inside the house? Do you have ayat of the Quran hanging on that will be imprinted in the memory of your child? Do you sit together and have dinner as a family and say Bismillah and talk about faith in a conversational way? I tell people, I have a challenge for you. I bring for them Sahih al-Bukhari and I say, open it and go through it from cover to cover. Hardly Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave a lecture in his life. Hardly. Most of the books of hadith are documented conversations that happen between the Prophet and his Sahaba, back again to the model of Suhbah. So as a parent, you want to be a parent, you want to be a place of authority, but at the same time, you want to always have a conversation. How do you inculcate Islamic education in the life of your children? Is by talking about it and associating it with happiness. Associate talking about Islam with a field trip, with a going out to nature, going to the beach, with a eating dessert, with a watching a movie, cartoon movies about the stories of the prophets, and then eating some popcorn or some dessert. Associate it with something positive, speak about it. Know that it's not about the lecture that you're going to give your child, it's about the conversation. Any indirect conversation, any storytelling will have the highest level of retention. Long time our Muslim educators said, Afatul ilmi nisyan, which means the sickness of learning is forgetfulness, the problem of retention. You teach, then kids forget everything you taught. How can you have the highest level of retention? Through telling stories, through conversations, through experiential learning. That's how you're going to do it at home. So it's not mission impossible. It's actually just be yourself, with your identity as a parent, with you celebrating Eid, with you being this. This is obviously aside from, we're talking all of this aside from the weekend school and the after school program and the full-time school, which as I'm a diehard full-time school, parent and Muslim. I don't have to be a sheikh to be a diehard for Islamic schools. But I'm saying aside from that, don't make it difficult. It's very easy. It's actually very joyful. It's very beautiful and very positive, and you will reap the benefit and you will see the positive change in the life of your children, especially when you catch them early as they grow up. And as they grow up, you add to that traveling overseas and going Umrah and going to Turkey and going to Morocco and going to Malaysia and going to this, and associating vacation with Islam. So always go for background, always go for environment, always go for the indirect education, and it will go a very long way, inshallah Rabbil Alameen. And I will stop here.
Inshallah, thank you. It's very helpful. Well, Sister Nashaba, Sheikh Ala talked a lot about how we can be parents he mentioned the formal ways, but informal ways too. What about Islamic education, more formal forms of education?
I think ditto to everything Sheikh Ala said, because we get that asked early on by many individuals all the time. If you're an educator, you know the best of the public schools as well as private schools, you know what the bad schools are, quote, and the good schools are. And it really is looking at living Islam as a way of life, that it's natural and it's beautiful. The Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, you connect that to nowadays the current research, and it strongly indicates that children will emulate what they see and being modeled around them, and they will internalize that as they develop their individual identity. So everything Sheikh Ala is saying goes back to the Sunnah, and we fast forward to current research is just proving what the Sunnah had 1400 years ago. We talk about retrievability and making information comprehensible. That's what we do professionally as a living, taking strategies of how do we make science standards and math standards comprehensible and retrievable. Well, how do we make Islamic practice comprehensible and retrievable and natural? And it all comes down to that modeling. So a quick example is the Prophet ﷺ, when he saw a young person struggling to shear a sheep, he didn't go over there and scold him and saying, "You're doing it wrong." He went over there and said, "Oh, you look tired. Let me help you." And he sheared the sheep so that the child could see how to do it correctly. And I think all of those little things are going to help show how we can interact so that the children not only create a strong bond with their parents, which is critical when they get to the older ages and they're looking to create their own identity, but also looking at internalizing things like prayer. It's a natural thing. If they see us praying our 5 daily prayers, and even when we go to Disneyland or the beautiful national parks, we're making time for prayer right there. It's a natural thing. It's not it's inconvenient. Reciting surahs when we get in the car and reciting a surah before we eat our meals. It just becomes who they are. And they'll do it naturally, even when they're with their friends. My kids would say, my friends asked them, "When am I saying?" Because I just say, Allahumma barak lana. They learned that at SVA. It's just something natural.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. Imam Tahir, if I could ask you really the same question, but maybe move into a little bit, not only what we can do at a young age, but also especially importantly, continuing into middle school and high school as our children get older.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of you. Jazakumullah khair for organizing this, and Jazakumullah khair to everyone that is attending. I think that, and I've said this many times before, it actually starts with this. Educating yourself on how to raise children. Simply put, so many parents think that they know it all, that their way is the only way. And I'll be honest, it's something where very initially I didn't give a lot of thought to myself personally. Okay, you're just a parent and you figure it out. And then you come to realize that, and this was an eye opener for me more than anyone else, was that, having been raised here in the Bay Area, I thought I knew what it was like to be an American or an American Muslim. And it dawned on me really, really quickly as my kids went into public school that no, you don't. The challenges are very different. I'll have to be honest. I grew up in a part of town where there was a lot of gang violence in the city of San Jose. And that was, and when I found out as I became an adult and back into sort of the, living back in my community, that gang violence was not a big deal anymore. I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but it's not. And it was like, oh, wow, that's a good thing. But then it came, it dawned on me, and this was something that that came to my attention after hearing Dr. Leonard Sax's talks and reading his books, that we have a whole new set of challenges. And so to specifically, go back to where I started this, knowing that you don't know it all, recognizing that, and educating yourself so that you can potentially become a better parent through various different experiences, right? It's not, because some of us we have these social circles, religious circles, and we think there's only one way of doing things. And really there isn't one way of doing things, because each of your child happens to be a different person altogether. To answer your specific question, middle and high school, honestly, I think there's a fine line. Our children need important, the education, very, very important, but they also have a need to be around others. They are older now. They're no longer babies. They do want to drive. They do want to go out and spend time with other people. And we need to figure out as parents the right way to do that. There is a fine line. There's, as to who they're, as a parent, we get to choose who they're going to hang out with. But a lot of that will be defined by who we hang out with, which means I may need to find a new set of friends. There's a lot of things that you do. And I'll give you a simple example. Just last night, I was at the masjid and I met a parent, and he's like, "Hey, Imam Tahir, see you on Sunday." I'm like, help me out here. He's like, "Oh, the Super Bowl party is at your house on Sunday." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Because my kid, who's 15 going on 16, he arranges to, I had told him, don't get me wrong, I had told him, so hey, listen, you want to, so supposedly there's like over a dozen kids, his friends, coming over to our house tomorrow, and at some point today he's probably just going to text me and said, "Dad, here's the order, go get whatever." So what I mean to say is giving them that freedom, giving them that autonomy, giving them that respect to be able to make certain decisions in their life, not helicoptering them. That's what's worked for me. I'm not saying that it works for everyone else, but there's a anzil an-nas ala qadri manazilihim, treat everyone based on who they are. So when they get into middle school, when they get into high school, recognize and realize that their needs are very, very different compared to where they were in elementary school, and that their needs are not the same as yours when you were growing up in a, let alone a different country and a different society right here in the United States of America. You know what I'm saying? Very, very different. So recognizing that and working with them to make that experience, a fun and a better experience. I'll share this, it's kind of personal, but in case, Sister Noshaba touched on this a few moments ago. Your kids, and Sheikh Ala also mentioned this, but Sister Noshaba specifically mentioned prayer, that they won't necessarily do what you tell them to do, but they'll do what you end up doing. It's just very simple. So this is very recently, about 7 or 8 weeks ago, I happened to be talking to the imam of the masjid, who happens to be the imam of the masjid which is close to where my son lives, my eldest son, who lives in Texas. And we're just this early Friday morning, I just called him to say hi to him, say salam to him. It'd been a while. And he tells me, he says, "Hey, your son shows up for the Fajr prayer." And at that point I was like, all smiles. I said, "Say it again." You know what I'm saying? I'm being honest with you. I said, "Say it again," because that's music to my ears. I didn't tell him to go to the Fajr prayer. I when he left home and when I go to see him, I tell him, "Hey, listen, kiddo, a few times a week, show up to the masjid. I'm not, you got homework, you're busy, do what you got to do, but, showing up for the Fajr prayer." I'm not saying this because he's my son. I'm just saying this because that's the company he was, not dad, but that was the company that he was around growing up. Those were the parents of his friends. who would go to the masjid. And so he didn't need to be told. In fact, if anything, his dad probably would have told him, hey, kiddo, it's cold in the morning. You don't have to show up to the masjid for Fajr. That's Imam Tahir for you. You know what I'm saying? But he decided to do that on his own. So it kind of goes back to what everyone has been saying so far. But, lay off on the pressure as well. I think we'll get to that later. Sorry about that. That's all I have to say.
That's wonderful. And Sister Heba, it would be wonderful to hear. I mean, I know that you work with children of all ages, and your background in mental health. We'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Sure. بسم الله اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Just to add on to what Sheikh Hala and Sister Nushaba and Imam Tahir already beautifully stated, one word really comes to mind, and that word is congruence. And just referencing a study done by Dr. Uthman Umarji, who is a fellow anteater from UCI. He joined Yaqeen Institute, and he actually did a research on something I'm very interested in because I'm researching postmodernism for my doctorate dissertation, and how it drives towards psychological fragility and not resilience. And just really, working on proving that amongst teens and young adults. So this research article was portraying, how, what childhood experiences or lack of experiences thereof drive adults into atheism or agnosticism, right? And what was found was that it relates to this concept of congruence. And a lot of what we see in working with families and teens and adults, that parents are really religious socializers for their children. And they are the biggest influence on their children because they are the only role models that children have from infancy, really up until the ages of 7 or 8, when they start to socialize and individuate and form their own social circles, et cetera, et cetera. So through modeling, through encouragement, through reinforcement and coactivity, parents, the more they emphasize spirituality and religion, but not just emphasize it, authentically practice it, and not in a begrudging way, like, oh, now I have to stop everything that I'm doing because I have to pray Dhuhr, right? It's really with an attitude of gratitude, but an attitude of cheerfulness, an attitude of, this is my safe haven, this is how I recharge 5 times a day. And then also explaining to them why the prayers, for example, are dispersed throughout the day in the way that they are. And we found links to willpower, for example. This is why there's such a big gap between Fajr and Dhuhr, because you have the highest willpower at that time. And it's been proven that, for example, crime happens much more often in the evenings. And this is why you have several prayers in the evenings, right? So you need more check-ins to keep your willpower on point and in check. So teaching children through your own authentic modeling, the importance and relevance of faith in their lives, and really making goodness look attractive. That's the whole thing that we're struggling with today, is there's such a pull, right, towards the other side, which is, everything that is opposite of religious and piety and righteousness looks more appealing to our teens and young adults today. And so it's really making goodness and everything that's so beautiful in our faith look much more appealing and look much more attractive, and also explaining the relevance of why we do what we do. And so it's, also they saw that, those who go into or have more of an affinity towards atheism, for example, are the ones that saw a lack of congruence in their own homes growing up. So my parents would tell me to do this, but then I would see them, doing hypocritical things or talking about people in a very negative way, or tearing down others and not really speaking about others in a positive manner, or hanging out with with individuals with questionable character. And so when they see this dissonance, how else do we expect them to be? And so it's really thinking about, the root of where this really comes from. And I think they see a lack of congruence many, many times. And especially when there is a turbulent relationship also between the child and their parents, because if we think about it, the concept of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the concept of a creator, is abstract for a child. A child is not going to grasp that concept. So what I see very often is that the teens and young adults who question faith, and this is what Dr. Othman mentioned in his article, he talks about soft and hard doubts. So those who have hard doubts that really drive towards atheism, everyone has soft doubts at some points. And those are the types of doubts that fleeting questioning, it's not the persistent type of questioning that drives towards, perhaps leaving Islam. So they really come to understand the concept of God through their relationship with their parents. Are my parents emotionally available for me? Do they love me unconditionally? Or is it only they love me when I achieve something that they want me to achieve? What is it that my parents emphasize? Do they emphasize my well-being and playfulness and teaching through wonder and exploration, and there's no pressure for the first 7 years, right? Which is again what we implement in our relationship with our kids, is the first 7 years is about play. Second 7 years are really through instruction and modeling and reinforcement, and the last 7 years are really befriending your child, right? And so it's, am I unconditionally loving them, or is it solely based on achievement and their grades and how they appear, and if they're thin or if they're overweight, or how they do certain things? Or am I accepting of how they are, but I'm just there to sort of guide and nurture and model certain things for them? So it's really keeping that in mind. We can't afford to have turbulent relationships with our children, and we really have to solidify that bond, because that bond is what will carry them through. And then when they get a little bit older, then it's that understanding of unconditionality and love from my parents. I begin to grasp this concept that I have a Lord, or a Rabb, who loves me unconditionally, and I have inherent worth because I have a ruh inside of me, that's untouched by anything external. Even if I slip and I make mistakes, my fitra is undamaged, it's untouched, and I can always come back from that, right? Because my parents always allowed me to come back when I made mistakes, and they didn't berate me or put me down or treat me in a very condescending manner, and they didn't have a problem with emotional reactivity. They weren't highly emotionally reactive. So a lot of it for the parent is about emotional regulation, is what I've seen. And the better parents are able to emotionally regulate their own system, the more safe the child feels with their parents. And then they have a better relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they understand that Allah is all loving and his mercy encompasses all things. So I would just say it's really this concept of congruence that I've seen repetitively or repeatedly, when it comes to this topic.
Mashallah, you all have given such wonderful advice to parents. And I think, the modeling, is really wonderful advice, sometimes hard to do, but very, very important. I think moving on to, my next question, I want to ask you all to share with us a little bit more about about relevant experiences that you or your children have had with Islamic educational institutions, whether that's weekend or full-time Islamic school, that have informed your opinions and some of the benefits that those institutions can provide for parents to help keep their children on the right path.
Maybe I can start again. Alhamdulillah, so wherever I moved, wherever I was throughout the past 25 years in the US, I have always attached myself to an Islamic school. 3 times there was no Islamic school, so I had to get the community together and start an Islamic school. I'm talking about full-time school. Sometimes there was no weekend school. We had to start a weekend school. what I feel is that, it's very simple, right? If you think about it in a simple way, a child spends at school 8 hours. Those 8 hours shape that child, mold that child, more than anything else, because they are also with their friends, right? No parent can spend another 8 hours after the 8 hours to sit down and check what happened and to, let's say, wash any damage that happened in the first 8 hours. It's not possible. It never happened in the history of mankind that a parent will go and spend equal amount of time at the end of the day after their kid were outside. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to be with the believers. That's why in Surah Al-Fatiha, when you read it, it's all plural, plural, plural. Iyaka na'budu. You, we worship. You, we seek help. Guide us to the straight path. So why? Because guidance is an environment in which guidance is possible. It's an environment. After you produce that environment, not everyone will be guided, because at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. But at least that's where you start. Our faith is a community-based faith. It's a communal faith. Salah together, fasting together, Hajj together, Zakah from the rich to the poor, Eid together, Salat al-Jum'ah together. So no Jama'ah, no Islam. It's a communal faith, right? Very, very well known and well understood by every Muslim. Why? Because that's the only way you can be a Muslim, stay a Muslim, and die as a Muslim, is when you are with the Muslims, right? That's how you live your life. So we find us, we gravitate towards community. We start going to the Islamic centers, to the masajid, and it makes your job a lot easier. So it wasn't a brainer for me that I would always go to Islamic schools. If I find an existing Islamic school and I find something that I don't like about it, I roll up my sleeves and I come and join and I advise and I help. I find like many people, they just want to judge the Islamic school that it's not perfect. Okay, it's a human effort. It's a multiple teachers and principals and this coming together to create an operation. There is no perfect school, none Islamic or Islamic school. Perfection doesn't belong to us human beings. It belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So idea here is I find that Islamic schools come under so much heat, so much pressure, so much criticism, and it almost absorbs, the people of guilt that they're not sending their kids to Islamic school. When they find something wrong, that's why we're not sending them there, right? So inshallah, we have a bigger heart and a bigger, to accommodate each other. My personal experience is, I would say my children, doesn't matter that I'm a sheikh or imam or this, actually it becomes harder because your kids find out that you're sheikh and imam, then a sheikh and imam is supposed to teach Islam. So the last one that I want my kids to learn Islam from is from me. Like, I'm so happy my son Malik and Badr and this think Sheikh Tahir is their buddy, right? Imam Tahir. I'm so happy, right? My son Malik is cooking with his own hands steaks this coming Monday for Imam Tahir, right? I'm out of it, right? So I don't, your parents were, after age 10, they're gonna just want to hear it from someone else, right? So if they're hearing it from their teachers, if they're hearing it from theirs, it makes your job easier. Then at the end of the day, you just sit down, eat dinner, 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, have a conversation. And, because the whole day your kid, for the most part, did not get destroyed and damaged in many different ways. So, one of the schools that my kids went for a long time to is Silicon Valley Academy, obviously. So Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, I would say Silicon Valley Academy saved my son Malik, the one that I'm talking about, the one who became the coolest kid when he graduated to high school and went to Averroes, to a point where Averroes called him back, and now he's working at Averroes part-time just to be a role model for other kids, literally just to be there and listen to the kids and connect with them. This Malik, at age 4, he was diagnosed with autism and Asperger's, and he didn't, up to age 4, he only knows how to say yes, no, baba, mama, age 4, right? By age 5, he added maybe another couple words. When he came to school, like, I took him and his older brother, Badr, to Cupertino High School because of this autism issue. None of you who know Malik think he was ever in his life diagnosed with autism. You will never even think that, but actually he was. And he didn't know how to say anything up to almost age 6, right? So I took him at age 6 to Cupertino High School, 40 kids in the class. They all made fun of him. He was destroyed in 1 month. Badr and Malik begged me. They are now 21 and 19 years old. This is like 15 years. They begged me to take them back to Everwies. So after 1 month, I said, okay, I have done my job. I was trying to get something, maybe they will give them special attention. There was no special attention. There were hardly anything. You have to go and fill a lot of paperwork. They made it look very nice, but actually at the end of the day, there was hardly any help provided, like 15 minutes of homework support after school. Wow, big deal. I got 10 times better at Silicon Valley Academy. So I brought my kids back to Silicon Valley Academy. And we went to Chicago a little bit because my wife's family is from there. They went to Islamic school in Chicago in the year we went there. We came back. They went to North Star. Then we came back to Silicon Valley Academy. Then they went to Everwies. I don't regret it. I loved it. And also we did homeschooling sometimes in between schools, like in the summer and this and that. And so after all, subhanallah, whatever Allah said in the Quran, inna la nudi'u ajra al-muhsinin, we will not put to waste the good work of people who really like care and to do ihsan. After pain and suffering, right? So much, I see the fruit right now. And I am very, very happy. And all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My brother Salahuddin used to drive from San Mateo in the traffic going and in the traffic coming back for 10 years. First going to Granada, then going to Silicon Valley. He's actually the one who told me about Silicon Valley. Then I brought my kids there and we both went. An hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the evening. None of us regret that. And alhamdulillah, that's at least my experience. And I leave it to the other speakers, inshallah.
I can piggyback on everything Sheikh Ala is saying. I'm a mother of 3 and a new grandmother as well to a 1-year-old, mashallah. So relevant experiences. I started out in the public school. I'm a product of California public school. So I've gone to California public school since I first entered schools as a child, higher education, and then as professionally, I've worked with public schools since I graduated. So as far as relevant experiences, we have seen the best of the best public schools. And, Sheikh Ala mentions Cupertino. People buy homes and they move in those wonderful, good schools. And I say that in quotation marks, to get their kids in those good schools. And what I ask parents when they are asking me, what are the good schools? Because they know professionally, I work with public schools and I also work with private. What are the best schools out there? And I'll ask them, how do you define best? Because if you're looking at test scores, look at the test scores of those kids going into that school. They're going to be high coming in, and they're going to be pretty much at the same place when they exit. So that means that public school or that private school took your money if it's private, and if it's public, you put them in there and they babysat your kids for 7 years, from kindergarten through 6th grade. Because high test scores don't make the child what they're going to do to be productive in society. So I had the opportunity to put my child, because I'm an educator and I have connections and this and that, providing trainings to their teachers in the best of the public schools here in the Bay Area. And what I found was lacking is you're at the mercy of the teacher you get. There are some incredible, wonderful teachers that I want as role models, and I wouldn't mind as having a role model as my child's teacher, even if they're a non-Muslim. But am I going to get that child in that teacher's classroom? Who knows? And then what happens in the next year and the next year? So academics are not everything. You can always supplement with academics at home. But it's the character development that to me is most critical, because that is a lot harder to develop. And undoing the damage, and we see a lot of that happening in different places. Right now, there's a huge debate in public schools. Many of you have heard CTR, the critical race theory, of what do we actually teach our children and not. And some of the CTR is great, and some of it is concerning. So it's good we teach about the accurate history in America, but is it good to teach that everyone should decide the gender of who they are? And they get to choose if they want to be a he or she, you know, and that's debatable. But do I want that as a parent? And that's something parents need to consider, because in a public school and other private schools, they get to decide. You're at the mercy of the teacher you have. And to me, it wasn't negotiable. I actually was new to the Bay Area when my eldest daughter was only 2. I went to the local public schools and I tried to see, okay, well, which one do I want them in? Because that's all I knew of. Then I found out there's an Islamic school, and I thought, let me figure that out. I was at Granada for about 6 months, and then I heard of Silicon Valley. And one thing that resonated with me is, at the time, Mazhar Jamil, may Allah be pleased with him, he said, I said, well, what's your philosophy for the school? He said that the kids love learning and that they love Islam. And I said, what else? He said, that's it. And I thought, that's my school. Because I can train teachers. That's what I do. I can train teachers, whether they have a credential or not. I can train them how to teach. That's the easy part. But to change a concept and a philosophy of character development, of having things, of using rationale of why we do things, not you better pray or you're going to hell, but, oh, let's pray because it's a beautiful way to express our gratitude. It's a beautiful way to get a break during the day. You know, it's like yoga for in many of those positions, you know, related to something they can actually relate to in life. And that's even with the academics. I found all 3 of my children went there from preschool all the way up through either middle school or the accelerated high school program. And they relate even the science to, oh, the 7 layers of the atmosphere. This is what the Quran have to say about that. It's not just Islam taught as an isolated, different topic. It's part of the way of life. It's social justice. You know, Prophet ﷺ always advocated for social justice, even before it was popular. So as parents, you know, organizing with fellow parents and organizing with teachers about helping refugees, et cetera, you know, that's going to be something I found that was very relevant, and that made my decision of, I put my children, they're a full product of that, and connecting it, what Sheikh Ala said, give the credit for my children's character building to SVA staff, because they were with my children, alhamdulillah, for those 8 hours a day. They are still the role models. My eldest is a teacher at the public school, her and her husband. She still talks about, and she's a elected public official, that confidence of Islam doesn't limit who I am as a female Muslim woman hijabi. It defines what I can do. And that's the character building that I think is critical when determining where you put your children.
Thank you for that, Sister Noshaba. Imam Tahir, please.
Yeah, my experience has been a little different. Bismillah. Where I live, and I'm just going to be very, very real about a lot of what I'm going to say. You know, school tuitions, you know, imam salary, not wanting to accept a zakat-based scholarship, where I lived, other either morning or afternoon responsibilities that by the time my eldest got into school, our youngest was born. And for those of you that know anything about us, our youngest came with a lot of blessings for us that needed a lot of our time. So there was a lot of factors as a reason of which we decided to go to public school. We could do pickup and drop-offs immediately. We had people who were willing to help us, take the kids to a private or Islamic school and back. But again, for some of the other reasons mentioned above, we went to public school. I'll just be very honest with you. I don't think I've ever said that publicly, because again, I did not want to get a zakat-based scholarship, and I feel very strongly about that. But in any case, our kids went to public school. When I say our kids, both my kids and my nephews, again, anyone that knows us know that they're all the same, if that makes sense. But in any case, we live together is what I meant to say. And so we're talking about 6 different kids here. And at this point, we're looking at everything between college and kindergarten. So, we went to public school. Were these public schools Cupertino public schools? No, they weren't. They were, your average run-of-the-mill San Jose, public schools. But very early on, we had made a decision that we wanted to not just focus on their academics, and focus on who they were as human beings. And that I've seen a lot of kids not do so well in school, but become really amazing people in life and have actually done really well for themselves. So, grades are important, but they weren't everything. They weren't everything. Very rarely have I had a discussion with my kids around their grades, and that's not because they have a 4.0 GPA, just for the record. So in any case, we went to public school, and we had a pretty decent experience. Again, our environment at home was very strongly Islamic. There was just non-negotiables, but not non-negotiables out of pressure, non-negotiables because that's just how we lived our life. You know what I'm saying? Now, does that mean Imam Tahir did not have a TV at home? No, we had a TV at home. Did his kids not watch cartoons? They watched more cartoons than I wanted them to, but we did regulate as to what they did in their free time, what kind of video games they were playing. So to this day, sports video games completely allowed, others not so much. We are, my brother and I were sports fans. So very early on, our kids became, very heavily involved in sports, both playing and watching. When the Niners make a touchdown, the entire street knows that they made a touchdown. That's how loud it is, just for the record. So, I mean, what I mean to say is we channeled their energies into areas that we wanted to channel them into. That said, fast forward, they got into middle school, and no, we were not comfortable with what was happening in the public school system, period. So I'm not saying we were comfortable at all, but we had certain challenges as a reason of because that's why they went to public school. In any case, by the time all of our kids have gotten into middle school, they've been homeschooled, period. And so we became very strong advocates of homeschooling. We got to control what they were doing, when they were doing it, how they were doing it, what they were learning, what they weren't learning, really being able to get ahead. By the time my son's peers had graduated high school, he had graduated from high school, finished memorizing the Quran, and completed 2 years of college. So now, did I have anything to do with that? Absolutely not. It was the du'as of my elders and my parents as a result of which, he got to accomplish what he did. But what I mean to say is that we got to control a lot of the environment. It came with challenges. It came with us having to find other families, their social piece. But then I got to control that. There's just, there were times we had to hire tutors because, mom and I did not have the ability to help them in ways that they needed help. Providing them the space inside the house where they could actually study and not be distracted. Now, did we have a big house? No, but that meant that if we, my wife and I planned our day around, not going into the bedroom. And if we needed to get stuff, we got stuff before, like there was a lot of planning that went into this. It wasn't just like, oh, we're homeschooling them and it's all like they can wake up whenever they want. No, we had a schedule. They had to do their homework. So there were things that, so we became a family that really, so my kid has never been to an Islamic school, or both of them have never been to an Islamic school. They're products of public school up until, a certain age, and then complete homeschooling afterwards. Now, you have to understand, your kid gets homeschooled, in the Silicon Valley during high school. And there's a lot of pressures. There's people who look at you and like, oh, you're crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, Imam Tahir, he crazy. He don't know what he's doing. His kid's not going to make it to a good college. And as Sheikh Hamza said many, many years ago, he made two statements, and I can't quote them verbatim, but I don't want anyone to misquote me, but something along the lines. When Zaytuna College started, and in the early days, and I've heard him say this more than once, that Wall Street is filled with a lot of very smart people, and look at what their greed has done to the country. Right. And so we don't just need very smart people. We need morally upright individuals. Right. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be awesome at what they do, but I'm just saying that, the moral piece is extremely important. Another thing I've heard Sheikh Hamza say more than once, and as recently as last year, he says that I would much rather have my son be a Muslim and a janitor than be an executive in an office and not have Iman. And, and that's a big deal. How many of us, especially those of us that live in the Silicon Valley, would want your kid to not have a college degree and have to work, a labor job, and I'm not saying that any job is menial or beneath us, but, we all want our kids to be educated and do really well for themselves. And so the Iman piece is really, really important. The moral piece is really, really important. And we really want our kids to be good human beings more than anything else, and having their Iman protected. Sister Hiba spoke about this right very early on, the concept of Iman, that, the kids losing faith. And so that's sort of been my and our experience. And then I will add on to that one other piece, the weekend Islamic school, because, and I think you did allude to that briefly, maybe when you asked. Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
please. Yeah.
The week. So again, there was Islamic education that happened at home. It wasn't, by the way, very early on, it wasn't very formal, contrary to what most people would believe, that, oh, you're an imam's son, so like, oh, you get to teach your kids all this cool Islamic stuff. You know what I'm saying? The imams don't have time to teach their own kids. I'll just be very honest with you. And their kids don't look at them as imams. So there's no, you know what I'm saying? It's just what it is. I'm just a dad and a husband at home, just for the record. Okay. And so, and I don't wear a kufi and a thobe at home, just for the record either. Like most people, like at home, I'm a different animal. Okay. Like if you come to my house, I'm wearing t-shirts and a short, and, I'm just like, I'm a human being, for God's sake. But in any case, the weekend Islamic school piece for us was very important, because all of a sudden we wanted our kids to have other Muslim friends, like-minded families, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so our kids initially went to the Stanford Sunday School. That's what they used to call it. I think there's a new name for it now. I don't know if they've officially changed the name, but yeah, wherever it was in Mountain View, Palo Alto, that's where they went for many years. And we carpooled with some friends, and, they went to that school, made a lot of amazing friends, and their friendships are still maintained. And then when SBIA started a Saturday school, a new Saturday school at the new masjid on Montague, our kids went there for a few years as well. And so that piece was very important for us, for them to have other Muslim friends, be in Muslim company. And so that's how we kind of supplemented the, being around other Muslims piece. And yeah, that's probably all I have to say.
Imam Tahir, thank you so much for that, frank and personal experience. I think the reason we wanted this panel to be, so diverse with different backgrounds is because not every parent can send their children, or maybe wants to send their children to Islamic school. And there are different paths to teaching our children how to be Muslim, right? Whether that's Islamic school, whether that's, weekend Islamic school, whether that's, other informal ways of teaching our children, modeling as parents, lots of family experiences. So there's so many ways that we can teach our children. So that's such a valuable perspective. Thank you so much. Sister Heba.
Yeah, I'll keep mine brief. But just thinking of my own background, I grew up. We didn't, in the cities that I grew up in the UK, and I didn't come to the United States until I was in high school. And the cities that we lived in, my father was a physician, and so he would have different contracts in different places until we settled in California. But I'll never forget the effort that my parents put in, because there wasn't an Islamic school. So I was in public schools throughout the week, and my parents would drive us 2+ hours each, coming and going out across the border into Oklahoma, so that they could take us to the weekend school. So like Imam Tahir was saying, weekend school is a big deal. It was a very big deal for us. And they were very cognizant of this fact of, like Imam Zaid said in one of our SVA fundraisers when we brought him not too long ago, he said, the messaging inside the home has to match the messaging outside of the home, and in their social circles. And, again, back to congruence. And so we did, I really took that to heart. And for our kids, for our girls, alhamdulillah, so far, they've had an incredible experience with SVA. And really, like Sister Nushaba said, the staff there were very loving, compassionate, and nurturing. And that really contributes and goes a long way in character development, more than pressuring and emphasizing achievement and grades and academic ability. There are things that do matter more than just, academic ability and how well you do in that arena. And so, it's that those were core things for us, and we found them at SVA. And I'll kind of, just stop there so that we can get to the other questions, inshallah.
I think that's really helpful, Sister Heba. And I think, all of you have shared, at some level, we are depending on some institutions, right? Some form of Islamic school, masajids, of course. And I mean, I think your comments, all four of you have mentioned how important these institutions are for our community. I mean, Sheikh Ala started with saying everything's a communal experience. Without the community, there is no Islam. And so I'm wondering if, as a community, have we created, and not only created, but have we supported the establishment of institutions and the flourishing of institutions to support our Muslim youth? And what more can we do as a community to really step up for these institutions that we all, use and depend on and should, engage with to help strengthen our youth and our community as a whole? Why don't we start with, okay, Sheikh Ala, go ahead.
Thank you, Jazakumullah khair, because probably after that, I will ask your permission to leave, inshallah. I think it stems from the knowing what you're dealing with. So for example, mashallah, most of our community are well off, and no one in their mind questions the priority of paying rent, the utilities, having a car, having health insurance, education. These are not up for question. These are like things we just do for our families. It's sometimes I feel like we think that the Islamic institutions, and especially the Islamic schools, are an optional thing. I feel that the Islamic school is my responsibility, just like my house rent is my responsibility. Because what are we dealing with? And Imam Tahir can elaborate on that, and the other speakers, mashallah, may Allah bless both of them, the sisters. At least I'm going to tell you what parents come to me to talk about their kids. And I'm talking as young as 10 and 11 years old, which is, it's just going younger and younger and younger. Very interesting. Number one, atheism, which Sister Hiba has mentioned that. My kid says he doesn't believe in God anymore, right? I just sometimes wonder, how could an 11 years old even talk about that? But you're talking from 10, 11, all the way till high school. Number two, they don't want to practice Islam. They checked out on Islam. They're not talking about there is a God or no God. They're talking about, we don't want to practice Islam, right? What comes next, obviously, with that is they don't want to prescribe to your value system, to your values and principles in life, which is your culture, right? We don't realize how much our cultures have been woven and intertwined with Islam. You get rid of Islam, you get rid of that beautiful culture of yours. Obviously, we have things in our culture that we have to change fundamentally, but for the majority of it, the family, the values, this and that. Next thing, gender confusion. Next thing is mental health. My kid wants to commit suicide. My kid wants to do this. My kids want to do that. My kid is going crazy. My kid is depressed. He's in the room, doesn't want to get out. So pick and choose. This is the reality today, not 10 years ago, not 15 years ago, not 25 years ago. This is today. The reality of our children is this. So, as Sister Noshaba said, like, okay, academics, we get it. So when I didn't like the academics in a certain Islamic school, I just hired a math teacher, a math tutor. And many times I did not have to hire a math tutor because the math teacher in the school, a shout out for Sister Denise, she's somewhere here.
Yes.
My God, thank you for what you did with Malik. May Allah bless you. We're endowed for you forever, mashallah. You made him love. He's good at math now in college, and he's learning computer science and coding because of the efforts you put with him. Jazakumullah khair.
Mashallah, she's right here. She's our admin with managing all the tech here. Mashallah, she is amazing. I can say that.
Oh my God.
Middle school teacher for SBA. Mashallah.
So yeah, so that's what I'm saying is, like, there's certain things imprinted in us by Allah. So Allah said, I made you nations and tribes. So we care about our culture. Allah put in us that the love that our kids some way, somehow follow our footsteps. These are in our DNA. You don't have to be a religious Muslim. You don't have to be Sheikh, Sheikha, Maulana, Ustada. You can be just the average, basic Muslim with a basic identity, and you still want to bring your kid to Islamic school. Not because you are very religious. It's just because to maintain that identity, to maintain the continuity in the family. One of the stories that happened in my life is a person came to me and showed me a text message of his child after graduating from college saying, Dad, don't call me, don't reach out to me. When I want, I will reach out to you. I'm making a long story short. The dad sat down with me and said, I have calculated how much I spent on his education from kindergarten to college. I've spent over $1.5 million because he went to the top-notch private schools. He got a very smart kid, amazingly smart and accomplished, who does not want to have anything to do with his dad, with his mom, with his family, with his culture, with his faith, with anything. How happy is the dad with that accomplishment? Totally depressed. So you might as well raise the kid of the neighbor, and just call it a day. These are our children, and we want our children to, carry our values. So when you say Islamic school, sometimes maybe we need to stop saying that. Maybe we call it community school, because people say, oh, I'm not religious, I don't send my kids to Islam. You don't have to be religious. You can be just an average Muslim, and you still want to consider Islamic schools, whether full-time or weekend or this or that. And you need to figure out, how do you do homeschooling? How do you counter what your kids are going through in the public school? I believe the entire community, we should have a meeting, a town hall meeting, that we share with the parents the options that they have in that regard. So just remember that these are the issues we're dealing with kids today. and we can't even catch up. It's like almost 80-90% of our kids are going through one of these 5 things that I have mentioned, and they're all devastating to any parent, religious or not. Like, I mean, very practicing or not, or barely practicing, they're all devastating to these parents, and we can't do anything about it. So inshallah, you know, we can do something for this generation and the next generation and the next, inshallah, if we put our hands together. But it's a must to support our institutions and to make them better and bigger. And if we don't like something, roll up your sleeves and come and help us out. Nobody will say, no, don't come and make our school better in whatever field you have. May Allah bless you. Jazakumullah khair. I'll stop.
Jazakallahu khair, Sheikh Ala. We know that you have to leave, but thank you so much for being here. May Allah bless you. You've provided us with such wonderful guidance and advice.
Thank you for inviting me. And Jazakumullah khair.
Sister Heba, we'd love to hear from you about how we can strengthen our institutions. What are we doing as a community to strengthen our institutions?
So I'll just speak from what is shared with me often, and I do speak to a lot of parents who share with me a lot of scrutiny towards Islamic institutions. And I would say it really goes back to this issue of emotional regulation and emotional reactivity. That one individual, I'll never forget a statement that she made, and she was saying that, you know, it's just a bunch of, that this specific organization is just full of a bunch of like insecure, highly emotionally reactive individuals. And I think we have incredible institutions and we have incredible leaders within those institutions. And, you know, I think it's very easy to fixate on what's wrong with them. Like Sheikh Hadat was saying, we have to recognize that it's a human effort. You know, it's not meant to be perfect. And I've often also found that the individuals who are very critical of Islamic institutions are the ones not really rolling up their sleeves and doing the work. So it's very easy to be on the outside and criticize, but it's much harder to be, you know, on the front lines serving, whether you're in the forefront or behind the scenes in your own capacity. You know, each person has a certain niche, and serving within that niche, within that capacity, and understanding all the while that it's not going to be perfect. It's a human effort. But I think developing more in our emotional intelligence, I really believe, is a huge area that's underdeveloped within Muslim communities across the nation, and many different individuals that I've met and spoken to. And I really believe it goes back to this, that, you know, our parents' generation, we're so focused on survival. We're so focused on building the institutions, making sure those seeds were planted. So they didn't have much energy, much time to focus on all these secondary things that are like emotional intelligence and developing ourselves, you know, and it seems more like of a luxury, you know, taking care of ourselves so that we're not overly exhausted, and then we become sloppy and we make mistakes. And oftentimes we make mistakes that can be harmful to other people or harmful to our children. And so do we invest in ourselves, right, in a holistic way, in order for us to be the best versions of ourselves, you know, and then we can focus on community work, etc. Or do we just have workers who are just, you know, depleted, exhausted, and, you know, are not really, you know, putting themselves last, because of course we are very service oriented, but we have to understand that we have to be service oriented while also caring for ourselves, so that we don't become exhausted. And when we're exhausted, we lose our willpower instinct. And then we aren't really, and then, you know, people fall into things, you know, fall into certain pitfalls, and aren't their best version of themselves. So I would say it really goes back to emotional intelligence, focusing on that area, especially if we're in service of people. So any institutions that are in the service of people, focusing on strengthening those areas. And really, it's actually even known now today that emotional intelligence is the highest form of intelligence. And that was the form of intelligence that our beloved ﷺ had. And that's what made him so successful. It wasn't the intellectual, academic types of intelligence. And so just understanding again that it's a human effort and focusing on further developing and enhancing those areas to make our institutions nationwide the best and strongest institutions that exist.
Thank you so much for that perspective. And I know we're already a little over an hour, so I think I would love to hear responses from Imam Taher and Sister Noshaba as well. Sister Noshaba.
So I think, have we created enough supports of Islamic institutions? I always think there should be more. I don't think more is better, but I think there are areas such as the emotional health. Many of you have heard of the Cordoba project down here in the South County of the Bay Area. And that's one of their main goals is we have, alhamdulillah, quite a few masjids. But what about other areas such as establishing a campsite, a retreat site for Muslims that we can go to, our children can go to, and use it for different areas to nurture and address things and build that spiritual and emotional self. I know SVA has it ingrained within. If you go to SVA, then they have something called Soul Shop, that not only are you getting your academics, but you're building your character of how do you identify what bullying is, rather it's coming from a teacher, rather it's coming from an individual, peer, rather it's coming from an adult relative. What is it? How do you deal with it respectfully? But it would be great to establish, other places, for example, if you don't go to Islamic school, but that can help nurture and develop that, to help instill in children areas of how do we live by the examples of the Prophet ﷺ in volunteering to serve those in need in our community. So establishing places and going to places that allow children at an early age to go and food farm box packing for the needy families in the Bay Area. How do we get involved with civic action? We have CARE that's great for adults. They have programs for adolescents and high schoolers, but bringing some of that at the earlier age, taking our kids to stand up for a protest. My child was probably 3 months old in a stroller. Did she know what was going on? No, she just liked the balloons and the noise. But it's really having organizations that are going to help organize and coordinate that on a regular basis. So kids realize that's just what we do. As Muslims, we don't wait till it impacts us and then we speak up. We're speaking up for things that are important to community at large. So I always think there can be more institutions or organizations or aspects added to the institutions we have to support in those areas. And I think one of the final things is really encouraging, regardless of what institution it is. One aspect I'd love to add is to encourage our children, it's great to have a hobby. Find your hobby, find your talent, and use that, whatever it may be, to build a better humanity. If we can just get all community members to help instill and reiterate that with projects that they have, then it's not going to be every child needs to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, with all due respect to doctors, lawyers, and engineers. And I'll give a personal example. I have a daughter who is an educator, special ed, which is unusual because usually people don't want to go into special ed. It's a lot more work, but she loves it. I have a daughter who's a cinematography major and graduated and now is working in that and does films and short films and documentaries and even different videos that might be a music video, but it always has a message with that. And then my youngest daughter, she wants to go into law, but that's good. She wants to go into law for social justice. But what I'm saying is institutions that can help establish, it's important to identify what your talent and hobby is. Just use it in a way to benefit humanity. And you can make money at it too. But to be independent, that's always good. But I think more institutions that address those areas is absolutely what's needed.
Thank you so much, Imam Taher.
Bismillah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you for the awesome questions. Have we done enough? No, we haven't. I'm just going to say it outright. We haven't done enough. Do we need more? I'm not sure. Do we need maybe multiple campuses? Maybe. It could be the same institutions that are already doing the amazing things, but having a campus, closer to home. It's no secret, you guys moved recently, Silicon Valley. One of the sites that you were looking at pretty darn seriously happened to be a minute away from my house. And I know that I shared this with some very close friends, and they were all really, really excited and said, oh my God, we are going to have an Islamic school right next to our house. Well, in any case, you guys are far away from my house. And I know a family that lives a block away from my house that drives their kids to Silicon Valley Academy. And I think it's a 40-minute drive every morning. So they were willing to make the sacrifice, whether, they wanted an Islamic school for their child. If it would have been a minute away, they were going to bring them. And if it's 40 minutes away, they're still going to bring them. Different people, different, sacrifices, as Sister Hiba mentioned a few moments ago. But have we done enough? I don't think we've done enough. I think that there's a lot more that we can do. When I say we haven't done enough, what does that mean specifically for me? It means that we still don't have the infrastructure that we need. There's amazing schools that happen to be out there, but we're still renting space. We still don't own our buildings, which means that literally, if we can't find space, inshallah, that'll never happen. But if push ever came to shove and we can't find space, do we shut down? The amount of money we're spending on rent, we'd rather be spending that kind of money on making payments for our own property, right? And we don't want to get into the whole mortgage difference of opinion here. We're just, assuming that it's a Sharia compliant loan that we have, clearly. But again, would that be money that we'd be spending on our own building? So can we do more? Then we have Islamic schools that have done an amazing job. How many really amazing weekend Islamic schools do we have that we say, wow, these are yeah, I can go here, here, and here, and you're having a hard time deciding. Nowadays, you're probably looking at, maybe a dozen and a half weekend Islamic schools, weekend programs, and maybe there's just a few or a handful that are just really worth saying, that are actually worth it. I'm just being honest. And then another big piece that we have kind of missed out on, and again, it's a work in progress. In fact, Sheikh Ala and I had a very lengthy conversation around this a few days ago, is after school programs. What do we have? Do we have after school programs where kids can go? Again, I know that there's Silicon Valley parents who are thinking, oh yes, we want a rigorous academic after school program. If I had my way of doing this, I don't know if it would have a lot of rigor. It would probably have a lot of fun, just come hang out. You need homework. We have homework stations. You need math homework. Here's a math homework station that you could go to. You need science homework. Here's a science homework station that you can go to. You want to play ball. You can go outside and play ball. You want to have a snack. Just go to the eating area and have a snack. Just be whoever you want to be, but be yourself with good company, in good company, and hopefully eventually get married to each other. But that's a topic for a different day. But again, what I mean to say is, by the way, the Jewish community has very successfully done this for people of my generation and the generation before me in the United States of America. So I'm not just making this stuff up. But again, I don't want to say that, mashallah, and I should have probably started by thanking Allah, and I apologize. Alhamdulillah, community's done a lot. Don't get me wrong. Can we do more? Yes, we can. Should we be doing more? Absolutely. And so there's room for improvement. I also want to add, and this is something I wanted to say earlier, I completely forgot. People have this taboo with Islamic schools, like, oh, Islamic school, are my children going to make it to a good college? What's their experience going to be? Are they too sheltered? There's no such thing as being sheltered anymore. They have social media. Okay, there is no being sheltered. They know everything, whether they're in Islamic school or public school. And as a person who has taught at Islamic schools and has been around the community for a long time, there have been kids, in fact, the vast majority of kids that went to an Islamic school, be it elementary, middle, or high school, have actually done really well for themselves in life. They've gotten into some amazing colleges. So this whole taboo that happens to be out there, that if your kids go to an Islamic school, they're going to be sheltered, or that they're not going to get into a good college, you can forget about that. That might have been the truth 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That's no longer the case. Islamic schools are probably far better than most other schools. And they're doing really well for themselves. So if that is a doubt that you have, you can completely forget about that. And last but not least, there are, and Sister Noshaba alluded to this a little while ago, there are conversations around faith, around gender, that are happening in the public school system that are completely not in line with our values. And we're not saying that Muslim kids should not be aware of those issues. Not only should they be aware of those issues, but they should know the Islamic position. They should know the right response to those issues from a faith perspective, from a political perspective, the right response. Because we're not the only ones in this. There's a lot of other non-Muslims who are in agreement with us when it comes to a lot of these issues. But at least we can protect and empower our children in Islamic schools. And that is something you have absolutely no control over in a public school system. And are we really willing to risk that? And I'll close by saying, we talk about, this is a meme that's been flying around for a while. I've seen it multiple times, that in the United States, a young man or woman, they can't buy cigarettes until they're 18. They can't legally buy alcohol until they're 21. Yet they can decide to have a sex change, way, way before that. And it's a really scary thing to think about. Now, I'm not saying that every kid that goes to public school is damned and doomed, but it's only getting worse as time progresses, and people who are in the system know about this. So Allahul Musta'an, we ask Allah for guidance. But for those parents that happen to be out there that are continuously criticizing, and clearly you are not here on this call because we don't want you here either, don't worry. But in any case, those that are here, hey guys, we may have a little bit of challenges. We may need to roll up our sleeves, but in the end, we're talking about the protection of an entire generation of Muslim kids. And that, your name may never be on a website. You may never sit on a panel to deliver a talk. You may not write a book. Parents, I'm talking to you. But your sadaqah jariyah, just by rolling up your sleeves and being that unknown soldier at your local Islamic school, will probably yield you a far greater reward than those whose names are on websites, who are sitting on panels and who are writing books because of your sincerity and because of your hard work. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Whosoever struggles in our path, we guide them to the ways of guidance. And the easiest way of Allah opening his doors for us will be for our own biological children, let alone the rest of the community. Just something to think about.
Can I just add something that Imam Tahir said, I think is so critical, is it's important to look at, the Muslim community is not the only community in the United States that's concerned about the whole character building of our children. Since the first time, and this was back in 1996, I attended and visited SVA, there have always been non-Muslims who bring their children to Silicon Valley Academy. My BFF actually moved 4 hours from the Central Valley to the Bay Area to put her children in Silicon Valley Academy. She's a Christian. She didn't do that to make me like her. We already knew each other since 4th grade. She did it because she couldn't find a public school or a private school that resonated with her on teaching character building, accepting others of other faiths, but focused on that character building. The academics she knew were solid because they do the GLAD program, but it was a character building. So it's important to recognize that if non-Muslim parents are attending Islamic schools and they're concerned about a lot of the same areas we are concerned about, that's something to consider.
This is such an important question and I just want to add something else to that, and I apologize. But I won't say where, but I've been to an Islamic school in the country multiple times. I visit them as a speaker, I visit them as a fundraiser, and it's kind of become a school and the board and staff that I know really well. This is a school where you not only have non-Muslim kids, but you have non-Muslim staff. You have non-Muslim staff that have worked at the school for over 2 decades. And by the way, interestingly enough, some of this staff may actually be slightly not aligned with us politically, but they are actually very aligned with us morally, which is why not only do they want to be at an Islamic school and abide by everything, but their own kids went to Islamic school. You know what I'm saying? Like there is an agenda out there that we really need to be scared of. And if anything, the Islamic schools will actually protect us from that agenda. I'll also say this, a lot of parents will say, no, we're willing to take the risk. It's okay. All these other kids have been to Islamic school. Those very parents, when their kids become teenagers, along with some of the issues that Sister Hiba mentioned at the onset, when she was answering the first question, parents not necessarily doing, what they're preaching, right? And just having that issue altogether. If your kids get into high school in a public school, and if you really haven't had a solid upbringing, it will bring about a lot of challenges. And Sister Hiba is like totally, she probably deals with those kids and those families all the time. By the way, a good career to be in is any form of a counseling career. As a Muslim, you'll bank buck. I'll tell you that, because there's just not enough out there. But I'm just telling you that, it's a real challenge. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. May Allah bless all of you for being here today, for imparting these gems of wisdom. MashaAllah, I think this has been such a valuable and educational, illuminating conversation. And before we adjourn, Imam Tahir, if I can ask you to please, lead us in dua obviously for our community, for our children, for our institutions, for all of us, inshallah.
I just want to share, when we talk about dua, my family comes from India. Politically, you may know what's happening in India in the last few days and last few years. And having spent the few years that I did in India, our teachers always referred to the madrasa, Islamic school, just another word, the madrasa, as the castles of Allah. Castles, that these were places where you created not just the physical space being a castle, but you created individuals, young men and women, going through these programs who were people who protected the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the moral uprightness. They protected that, they maintained that. And so that's just something that comes to mind as we turn to dua finally. But if I may, there's no dua, there's the Quran is, we don't need to go beyond the Quran. The Quran is filled with du'as in which we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our iman and the iman of our progenies. رَبَّنَا وَجْعَلْنَا, the dua of Ibrahim, رَبَّنَا وَجْعَلْنَا مُسْلِمَيْنِ لَكَ وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِنَا. Right? People say, will my children pray or not? رَبِّ اجْعَلْنِي مُقِيمَ الصَّلَاةِ وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي. Do you want your children to be obedient to Allah and His Messenger and obedient to you? رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا qurrata a'yun, right? There's the word we say for us and dhurriya, right? Dhurriya is a word that's our family, our progeny. So the Quran, I would urge all of us to look into those du'as. But with that said, we'll close inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا واجعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك وأرنا مناسكنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. رب اجعلني مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتي ربنا وتقبل دعاء. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. Oh Allah, for those of us, all of us that are raising children, grandchildren, that will have, inshallah, Muslim progenies until the day of judgment. Ya Allah, we ask that you protect our iman and the iman of our progenies until the day of judgment. We ask that you allow us to always be with families and in a community where our iman and the iman of our progenies can be protected through whatever the needs may be within those times. If it's a masjid, then a masjid. If it's an Islamic school, an Islamic school. If it's a youth program, a youth program. Whatever the needs may be for the ummah in order to protect their iman, their moral uprightness, to acquire amazing and powerful education so that they can make a difference in their lives, in their families, in their communities, and in the world, Ya Allah. Whatever is needed to facilitate that, we ask that all of those things are facilitated for us, our children, and our progenies until the day of judgment, Ya Allah. We ask that you protect our masajid. We ask that you protect our schools. Ya Allah, our beautiful schools that we have locally, wherever they may be it the Silicon Valley Academy, Granada Islamic School, Averroes High School, North Star, Peace Terrace Academy, and all of our schools, Ilm, the co-op in the East Bay, Ya Allah, whatever our schools may be, wherever our children may be attending, Ya Allah, we ask that you protect those institutions, whatever their needs may be, please fulfill them, Ya Allah. Make us and our children obedient to you, Ya Allah, obedient to the Messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam, obedient to our parents, Ya Allah. Grant us goodness in this life and the hereafter. Oh Allah, accept our du'as. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.